following program has received the internationally recognized Cine Golden Eagle Award for excellence in education.
About 4 minutes of the first half left. Thompson there coming in front of Campbell. And we've actually got a fire in the stand on the far side of the ground. And that looks very nasty indeed. Now the police have gone over there to try and quell the fire, and they're frantically getting some of the supporters out. And the game has obviously had to stop. The day of triumph could turn into a day of disaster here for Bradford, and the 2,500 people in that stand are panicking. They are frantic to get out. One can feel the heat. The whole stand is going up in flames, and that person there looks to be burning. There is no cause for celebration for anybody here. This is awful. The heat is now becoming tremendous. I'm sitting immediately opposite the main stand, and I can feel the heat. It's almost beginning to burn me over here, quite honestly. The whole stand is going to have gone in the space of a few minutes. Quite extraordinary scenes at Valley Parade. This was supposed to be a day of utter joy, triumph and celebration. It's turning it into a nightmare. There is a policeman on fire there. The roof is caving in. The black pall of smoke is rising hundreds of feet in the air, and the whole place is scorching. Bodies are being dragged away. Hopefully now, as I look across the ground, everybody is out. You can see the exhaustion and the panic on the faces of some of those people there. And this is a burning hell. 10 minutes ago, we were looking at a football game. And look at that! Oh, the poor man! This is human tragedy.
By the time it was over, 38 people had died in that 1985 fire at Bradford, England. It took less than 10 minutes for the entire stadium to burn to the ground. The Bradford fire is a frightening example in a long history of public assembly tragedies, tragedies caused by people unprepared for the shocking force of a fast-moving fire. Throughout this video and the companion handbook which comes with it, there are guidelines for organizations who provide services to the public, guidelines to help your organization create a plan of action to follow in a fire emergency. California State Fire Marshal Ron Coleman.
The best assurance in a public assembly for fire and life safety is compliance with the code. First and foremost is detection and warning that lets people know there's an emergency in progress. That's a really critical factor. Second factor is the placement of the exits. Are they appropriately scaled to be able to deal with the size of the audience? Thirdly, I would say exit lighting is very, very critical, especially if the lights are actually turned down like in a theater or someplace like that. You put all those pieces together, you have a building that is reasonably safe to put large numbers of people in. Anything that's built into that building is built into that building and that assembly for purposes of protecting people in a very short time frame. And that short time frame is when an emergency is in progress.
If compliance with the fire code is the starting point, maintaining compliance is the next step.
A good example might be a light bulb and an exit light. The fire department or fire agency may come around once a year and say, we'd like to take a look at this building to see if it's up to code. But that's not fire prevention, that's fire inspection. Fire prevention is when people pay attention to the fact that something is not working the way it's supposed to. For example, if a light bulb goes out, it needs to be replaced right then, not when the fire department shows up 6 months from now. If a manager walks around and says, those high chairs are blocking the exit, let's move them over here into a storage area, that's fire prevention too.
Fire prevention and maintenance of fire safety systems is Nancy Carl's business. Getting employees and managers to take it seriously is one of her challenges.
When I say that exit sign light is out, the owner or whatever say to me, oh, never noticed it. And yet I go back 2 weeks later, it's still out. But it's hard convincing those people who aren't taking it seriously until something happens, because that whole attitude of it's not going to happen to me is a strong attitude. And then I think once it does hit you that it is real, then you kind of go into shock for a few minutes about, oh, now what do I do?
I always tell people that one of the best ways to be prepared for an emergency is to live it in your mind at least once or twice before it actually happens to you. What reaction do you expect to have? Where are you going to be? How are you going to notify the fire department? You're going to be at the front of the crowd or you're going to be at the back of the crowd?
Here are some ideas from fire departments to help you be prepared. Know where the fire safety equipment is located.
There's a fire right now, who can go and activate a pull station? And when I ask that, most of the time I get anybody. We're all creatures of habit. We walk into the same building all the time, and we don't notice anything. But what we want you to do is get in the habit of noticing exit signs, noticing where things are located. And every employee or everyone that works there really needs to be more aware, and especially in areas where there's assembly, because the visitors don't do that.
Ask your local fire authority for assistance.
If there's any one thing that really improves the public's safety, it's a good, strong working relationship between the local fire authority and the people who run the business.
How will you communicate in a fire emergency?
The more that you improve the ability to communicate with people as to what's going on, the more likely the evacuation is going to occur timely and in a safe fashion.
Watch for dangers that may impede evacuation.
You cannot put something into a public assembly for the people's protection and then deny them access to it. A good example would be a blocked exit. It's not uncommon in public assemblies for someone to say, well, let's stack some boxes up in front of this. Because after all, nobody uses this to come into the building, but they got to remember that it's designed to get people out of the building.
The other thing that I think employees really have control over is propping open doors. Lots of times they'll prop open doors because they're carrying things between one area and another to make it easier for themselves, but then when they're finished, they don't go and unprop it. They leave it propped open. So if there is a fire, we now have major smoke spread.
Develop a plan to assist people with disabilities.
And you need to know what the procedures are for someone who is physically impaired, because if they are unable to walk down the stairs, we don't want you to just leave them behind. We want you to be able to follow some emergency procedures with them. You need to take responsibility for them.
The video handbook provides step-by-step guidelines for assisting people with disabilities in an emergency. Successful evacuations are a result of practice.
People really learn best by making mistakes. Go through some mock fire drills with some customers there and what you would do with them and who's going to lead them out and block off an exit. So now you can't use that exit. What are you going to do? And it's amazing the number of people who stand there. I've counted up to 15 one time before finally someone in the group said, oh, I know where the other exit is. Let them make the mistakes during the fire drills, during training and different other things. That's the time to make them, not when there's a real fire.
By conducting regular fire drills, you can test your fire safety systems and also encourage people in your organization to respond seriously when they hear the alarm.
Way too often, People in buildings, they call security and ask them, why is the alarm going off? It's very annoying. I can't talk on the phone with that alarm going on. But they do nothing to respond to it. The purpose of it is to tell you that something unusual is going on. And true, it may not be a real fire, but we don't know that initially. So you need to take it seriously, because if it is a real fire, you wait, and someone else leaves the door open, and someone else just props open another door, you could be in a really serious situation, because smoke is the killer in most fires.
There is a policeman on fire there. He's managed to quell that. A woman being led from the stand, and there are still one or two people, and
The crowd cheers while others nearby lay injured and dying. Frantic, inconsolable. Immobilized by shock, people in a fire do react differently, but they all respond to one thing: leadership. Actor Eddie Foy knew this at the Iroquois Theater fire in 1903.
They claim he saved all sorts of lives by merely standing up on the stage when the fire was in progress and telling people what to do. It's amazing how a small amount of leadership can have a big impact on an evacuation.
There is a group mentality or state of mind in a fire emergency.
You would think that most people would react kind of logically, but they don't. And they go through a denial phase. It's not uncommon. In fact, I've personally been on fires in which restaurants, for example, the patrons would not evacuate even while smoke was pouring out of the door of the kitchen because they wanted to finish their meal.
But denial can quickly change to confusion and panic in the absence of communication.
That's a very key factor, because the people in the front, in a lot of cases, do not realize the significance of what's happening at the back. And the people at the back realize how significant the emergency is, but can't communicate it to the front. So their only way of communicating is to push and to shove. Well, of course, that's counterproductive in terms of evacuation.
Panic in a public assembly fire can be prevented with leadership and knowing what your own responsibility is.
That's why it's important for the employee to understand that they're not there just merely to serve that person for whatever they came to visit the place. They're there to serve that person in the event that they have an emergency. I always tell employees that if a team approach is utilized and if the people have been adequately trained, they can make that process go a lot smoother.
This was supposed to be a day of utter joy, triumph and celebration. It's turning it into a nightmare. There is a policeman on fire there. The roof is caving in. The black pall of smoke is rising hundreds of feet in the air. And the whole place is scorching. Bodies are being dragged away. Hopefully now, as I look across the ground, everybody is out. You can see the exhaustion and the panic on the faces of some of those people there. And this is a burning hell. 10 minutes ago, we were looking at a football game. And look at that! Oh, the poor man! This is human tragedy.